This is the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, here to help you navigate and thrive with ADHD in adulthood. I'm your host, Zena, and I was diagnosed at age 36. As with many ADHDers, I have a rebellious and nonconformist style, and that means that there will likely be swearing in the coming episode. Please be mindful of any little people. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast. It is late on a Friday afternoon, the sun is shining, and I am very happy to be here with you all. So, before we dive in, I just wanted to say I really think you're going to get a lot out of this episode and the next one. This is actually a two-part series. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do that. Click the little subscribe button. And I would also be incredibly grateful if you would leave us a 5-star review. That review helps other ADHDers just like us to find this podcast and get support. So I would be so grateful if you would do that. So as I said, this is a two-part series, and in the second part, we're going to cover how to actually process and feel our emotions, which is a skill that we most often were not taught growing up. And also we're going to understand why feeling our feelings is actually the key to changing them, especially long term. We'll also explore the link between feelings and actions and how emotions are actually a good thing, especially when we have tools for managing them. So there is a lot to cover on the topic of emotions. So as I said, we're going to have it in two parts, but today we're going to focus more on the emotional dysregulation and the outbursts part of it. Okay, so those of us with ADHD, we often experience emotional dysregulation. So what that might look like is you might identify as or have been labeled as being too sensitive, as having a very low tolerance when it comes to frustration. That's definitely me. Being impatient or quick to anger, unable to wait, have a real challenge when it comes to waiting. Show your emotions more easily than others. It's definitely me. And feel things more rawly or deeply than other people do. You may also be more quick to get excitable, easily excitable. Ruminate on things. That's me too. So I'm going to give you some examples of what those can look like, and I'll share from my own life. So as I said, I get frustrated very, very easily. And so sometimes when the kids are fighting, so my partner has 3 boys, and they're boys, so they fight like physically. They're always touching each other. They're always like up in each other's business, and loud and stuff everywhere, and it can be very full on. And when they don't listen, I will get very annoyed, more so at my partner for not making them listen or letting them get away with it. He is way more chill and relaxed than I am. I am very much about boundaries and structure, and I shouldn't have to say something twice. Whereas he's very chill. So I get very easily annoyed with him when they just, get away with the fighting, or he said keep it down, and they just get louder and louder. So I'm like the first person to put them in timeout because I'm the one who gets frustrated when I think that they should know better. Another example is I was at a workshop recently. It was a public speaking workshop, and I was learning skills from the presenter, and he was sharing a very personal story, and it was a very emotional story, and it made me well up with tears. And he looked directly at me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "You've drawn all attention to me. All eyes are on me. Cue the embarrassment." But I feel things so deeply, and I get very easily emotional when other people are sharing their stories or their struggles or their challenges, and that can be very hard to hide that. Another one is years ago, I worked in a retail store, and it was a clothing store. And when new clothing items would arrive, we would get a good maybe 2 or 3 huge racks full of new dresses and pants and skirts and all the things. And they would be in these big kind of covered plastic bags. And you would have to take the bags off, and then you would have to cut the cable ties off, and you would have to change the hangers from metal hangers or plastic hangers to store hangers, and you would have to mark off all the stock, and there was all of these things, that systems and processes that you had to go through. Now we're doing that in the middle of the store. There were generally 2 of us doing that in the middle of the store, and there are customers coming into this retail store. And I would get so angry or annoyed when they would interrupt me and ask me, hey, do you have this in a size 10? Or, hey, can you check if you've got more of this? Or can you tell me where I will find this? And of course, that's part of my job, is for these customers to come up and, I was working in customer service. I was there to serve them, but I was so focused on the task at hand, and I really enjoyed that job of going through the new stock, marking it off, getting it ready and out on the floor. And I would get so annoyed and impatient with those people. But my colleagues, on the other hand, were not fazed at all. They're like, yeah, of course, this is still going to be here. It's no worries, right? But because those of us with ADHD, we can often struggle with switching between tasks. That was such a challenge for me, and that would really frustrate me and anger me. I also once quit a job in the heat of a moment because I was so angry at the way I was being treated, so I literally just quit. Another thing I was thinking about as I was making some notes for this episode is that if I had known about my ADHD and had a better understanding of my emotions and the emotional dysregulation component and how to also regulate my emotions, if I'd known about that sooner, I think some of my friendships would have turned out very differently. That's just something I'm reflecting on. Now, I typically express my feelings before I think about it. Now, most people do it the other way around. Okay, the neurotypical people of the world will often think about how they want to respond or react. Now, my partner is a great example of that. He thinks about what he wants to say and then he responds. I do not. My brain does not get the message. It just blurts it out, or it displays it all over my face, what I am thinking. He loves to tell me that my face hides nothing. You can tell exactly how I'm feeling by the look on my face. I've even had clients who have told me that I can coach them simply with my facial expressions. It's one of my superpowers, my friends. Now, ADHD is so much more than just being hyperactive or impulsive or unable to focus. Having explosive or unregulated emotions are a big part of ADHD. So let's look at some of the brain science behind this and kind of understand where this is all coming from. So first of all, our emotions come from our brain. I think it's really important that we make that distinction and we identify that, because we experience emotions in our body. We feel them from the neck down, but emotions come from our brain, okay? The part of the brain where the emotions come from is called the limbic system. Now, I want you to picture a huge, wide, flowing river. Inside that limbic system, okay, inside that river, there is the anterior cingulate. We'll call it the AC for short. Now, this is the dam in our river, okay? So we've got the part of our brain, which is the limbic system. Inside of that, you've got the dam, which is called the AC, the anterior cingulate, okay? So our emotions come from the limbic system. Now, that other part, the AC, which we're referring to as the dam, that is responsible for emotional expression. It's the part of the brain that pauses to consider how we react and how reacting in such a way might impact ourselves or those around us. Now, for most of us with ADHD, that dam does not work. okay? Meaning we flood. The emotions just run right out. They don't reach the dam and, pause before being released. No. Okay? Our dam is broken. Our emotions just flood right on out without the pause to consider how reacting in such a way might be interpreted or the consequences it may have. I also want to give credit and shout out to Kristen Carter for the dam example, because it was something that she shared and it really does help us to understand how this part of our brain works. Okay? So that part of the brain, the anterior cingulate, the AC, the dam, that helps us to make decisions in social conflicts. So where there is a social consequence now or later for what we're about to do. So that dam is what negotiates and buys us time, allowing us to consider how we want to respond in relation to our short or long-term goals. In neurotypical people, that part of the brain will often suppress the desire to yell at the boss and to tell him you want to quit. In my case, though, I'm neurodivergent, it did not. It did not. So, in the show notes below this episode, wherever you're listening to it, I am going to link, and I'll also put this on the website too, on my website. I'm going to link to a really good video that I think is only about 6 minutes long, and it's from Dr. Russell Barkley. Okay, and he is the author of Taking Charge of Adult ADHD. He's an expert on ADHD. So he talks about emotional dysregulation in ADHD, and he shares the brain science behind it. He shares images and scans that further explain how all of this works and all of the technical stuff behind it. I don't want to go too deep into that because I don't think that it's necessary for what we're covering here today. Okay, but one thing I did want to say is that the research also shows that our AC, our anterior cingulate, our dam, okay, does not activate in people with ADHD. So that part of the brain on the scans, it doesn't light up. So it doesn't look like it's functioning at all. It's just not working. Okay, so our dam is not working. So what that means is that we will experience emotional impulsivity. We will have a lower frustration tolerance. We will be impatient, and we will also show our emotions more easily. Don't know about you, but I just ticked all of those boxes. Now, it's really important to understand, and he does cover this and go into great detail about it in the video, that this does not mean we have a mood disorder. Hands up if you have ever been called moody. I have. Okay, we don't have a mood disorder. We have a self-regulation of emotions problem, not a mood disorder, right? Studies show that those of us with ADHD, we do not have the ability to stop, think about, calm down, and regulate our emotions before responding and reacting. I'm going to read out this quote this is a quote from Dr. Russell Barkley as well. The emotions that we experience are quite normal. Okay, so the emotions themselves are quite normal, but most people would have suppressed them, would have inhibited, moderated, self-calmed, self-soothed, and then brought those emotions in line with their longer-term welfare in that situation. That is what the person with ADHD cannot do as well. Right? We struggle to inhibit, self-calm, self-soothe, contemplate, and moderate the emotion. What I loved, one of the things that he said, and I loved, and I just grabbed a chunk of the quote, was everybody else felt what you felt, thought what you thought, but in their mind. Okay? So if you're, in a workplace setting and somebody insults a product, let's say, that you and your workplace sell, and you're there with your colleagues, and if somebody insults that product, something that you love and maybe you worked on, everybody else is probably going to be pissed. They're probably going to be upset. but they feel it, they think it, but they keep it in their brain, in their mind. The mood is the same, but the expression of the mood is not. We express that. If I was in that room, it would be all over my face, right? But I would also be the most likely person in that room to say something, okay? So when I was at that job and I was being mistreated, and I was the only woman there, that was part of this mistreatment. I won't go into too much detail. But any other woman in my position who had been in that workplace being treated the way I was being treated would have felt the same. And what's interesting is even one of the men there was also really angered by the way that I was treated. But the neurotypical people in my situation would think about the consequences of yelling at their boss and quitting. They'd think about that before they did it. And they would probably, suppress their anger and spend some time thinking about what they want to do and how they want to go about it. I, on the other hand, did not. I went from 0 to 100 in a few seconds. So a few other things to consider are stress, changes to hormones, especially estrogen levels. We've talked about it before on the podcast. When estrogen levels drop, our ADHD symptoms can often increase and our medication can sometimes be less effective. Okay, so stress, changes to hormones, and other circumstances in our lives can also make this area around emotions be more challenging for us. And I say that not to make you go, oh shit, I'm screwed, but so that you can be a little more compassionate with yourself, a little more understanding when life happens, okay? Now, regardless of all of this behind the scenes brain stuff that is happening, okay, inside our ADHD brain, we are still responsible for our emotions, for our actions, and for our reactions. We are still responsible. ADHD is not an excuse, it is an explanation. So let's talk about how we can deal with the explosive emotions. And I'm going to share with you how I deal with this and what, some of the research I have done also recommends for those of us with ADHD. Now, before we do that, I also want to be completely transparent and tell you I am a work in progress here. I experience emotional outbursts and, explosive emotions quite regularly. Frustration is my flavor. Just before recording this, my partner and I went for a walk. We went for about a 30-minute walk around the block. And he told me something about one of the kids. One of the kids had messaged him and said something. And I lost my shit. I did. I got really pissed off. Not at him, but at the situation. Okay? So I tell you that because this episode, these 2 episodes around emotions, they're just as much for me as they are for you. All right? These are things that I am continuously practicing and things I'm still, always using in my own life. Okay? So let's get to it. Here are the 5 things I recommend. Number 1, get to know yourself and understand what your triggers are. The more we know what angers us or frustrates us or, stresses us out, the more we can work with that. And we can also remove ourselves from certain situations. So, for example, I know that I get very easily angry or frustrated with the kids after dinner. So when we've all had dinner together and then we usually let them sit down and watch a little bit of TV before they go upstairs to bed. Sometimes they'll play, but around that time, they start to get tired. And as soon as you start talking about bedtime, there's pushback. They start answering back. They start to whine and complain. They pick fights with each other. So about 30 minutes before their bedtime, I head upstairs and I go and I take a shower and I start to wind down and get ready to get into bed. Now, together, my partner and I, we've been able to put systems and structures in place to support some of the triggers that we know, or I know that I have. So I'm very fortunate that he's on board. He will take the kids upstairs. He will get them ready for bed and all of that. He does all of that. Now, another one is that we have boundaries around what he shares with me in terms of the communication he has with the kid's mum. Now, sometimes that communication can be, as it can be in a separated relationship, it can be not very nicely communicated, let's say. And that can really trigger me. So we have really strong boundaries there. It's a need to know basis. If I don't need to know, then you don't need to share with me what the messages say, what the emails say, what's coming and going. So all of that to say, get to know yourself and understand what your triggers are. Then put systems and structure in place. Set boundaries and ask for help from the people around you if you need it. Number 2 is to educate those people around you. Educate the people in your life, your partner, your family, your friends, and explain what it means to live with ADHD. Share with them how our brains are different and what that means in terms of our emotions and how we might react or respond in certain situations. Share this podcast with them. I would also suggest you share the clip that I have linked to Dr. Russell Barkley about ADHD brains and, how it's different for us when it comes to emotions. Okay? Educate them and advocate for yourself. Help those around you to understand what's going on inside of you so you can ultimately help them help you. Okay? Number 3 is get support. Now, the reality is that we were not taught how to process our emotions. This is something we are going to talk a lot more about in next week's episode, and I'm going to walk you through how to do that. But if this is something that's really getting in the way of your life, then get support. Okay, support here will be incredibly helpful. Speak to your psychiatrist, your therapist, your counselor, or your coach, and together you can begin to build your emotional toolkit. Number 4 is exercise. Seriously, I know I've talked about it on this podcast before, but hear me out. For those of us with ADHD, the benefits of regular exercise are huge. Okay, it helps to increase dopamine levels. We have less dopamine, right? It also helps to increase serotonin, which helps with sleep, which is something that many of us with ADHD can have some challenges with. But serotonin and dopamine are both also part of responsible for regulating mood. Okay, so exercise ticks all of these boxes, but also it helps to, as I was just saying, regulate mood and process emotions. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute run or a 45-minute gym workout. It could even just be a 10-minute walk around your neighborhood. It will help you to regulate and process the emotions you are experiencing. Please try this one at home. All right, and the last one, number 5, is practicing healthy self-soothing techniques to calm your nervous system and to show your brain and body that you are safe and to help then change your state or shift your attention. Now, I use the word healthy in there very deliberately because this is something we will talk about in the future, but many of us have self-soothing techniques that we use that aren't necessarily that healthy or perhaps don't necessarily go in line with the goals that we have for ourselves long term. One of the ones that I used to go to was I would drink quite a lot of alcohol when I was experiencing a large amount of anxiety, especially at work. I have also used food, a lot of food, particularly sugar in the past, and binge eating to try and soothe myself. Okay, so that's why I put the word healthy in there. So when we talk about practicing healthy self-soothing techniques, okay, things like breathing. For me, I will often practice, like the box breathing technique is a great one, but one that I will practice is I will breathe in for 3 through my nose and then out for 5 through my mouth. And the more I do that, focusing on my breath, the more I can kind of calm myself down and regain control of what it is that I want to do or say next. Okay. Another one that's really good is using your 5 senses, especially when we talk about the nervous system and helping to calm and soothe ourselves. So it might be find 5 things in the room that are green. So using your eyesight, find 5 things in your room that are green. I can see I've got a green pillow, got multiple green plants, but I'll count 1 green plant. I've got a green book over there. I've got a green post-it note here. And outside I see a green palm tree. Okay, so just notice how that helps to shift your focus and your attention, and also, remove yourself from the strong emotion and just show yourself that you're here in your body, you're okay, and you're safe. Okay. Another one you might do is name 4 things that you can touch or feel. Okay. Ultimately, as I said, we're trying to show your brain and body you're safe and help to kind of start to regulate that nervous system and shift your attention as well, especially if you're starting to ruminate, which is something I'm very good at doing, or hyperfixate on something. Help to kind of shift your brain and your attention to something else so you can kind of regain logical control of what you want to do next. Okay. Now, here's a final thing that has been really helpful for me to understand and acknowledge, and I want to share this with you. I should not be able to regulate and display my emotions the same way that neurotypical people do. I should not be able to. My brain is wired differently. I do it differently. And I can work with my ADHD and the tools that I have and find systems and processes that work for me. But when I can accept, and that's why I share this with you, when I can accept I shouldn't be able to do it like neurotypical people. I shouldn't be able to do it like that because my brain is wired differently. When I can accept that, then I can be way kinder to myself, and I can use the systems and the tools and the processes to support myself with the brain I have. Okay? All right, my friends, that is it for this episode. And don't forget that next week we're going to talk more about the processing the emotions and how our feelings impact our actions and how we can change the way we feel. All right, it's going to be really good. So if you haven't subscribed, don't forget. All right, friends, huge love to you all. I'll see you soon. Hey, friend, I know exactly what it's like to feel frustrated and confused with your ADHD, and to wish that you could better understand what the hell is going on in your brain. And that's exactly why I created my coaching program, Thriving with ADHD. Inside Thriving with ADHD, you learn a step-by-step process to set and finally achieve your goals, to understand yourself and your ADHD. It's where you learn to feel better and manage your emotions and create systems and processes that work for you with your ADHD brain. This is designed for you to learn how to thrive with ADHD so you can create the life that you were meant to live. Visit zenajones.com/ADHD to learn more and book a consultation.